In Alabama, of course, Alabama, the House Education Policy Committee has passed legislation that now requires up to 15 minutes of class time at the beginning of each day in public schools in Alabama to be devoted to reciting the congressional prayer led by the teacher, which is recited usually before each session before U.S. Congress. The bill introduced by Representative Steve Hurst, a Republican, was passed in spite of a minority vote, as reports go. Supposedly 3 people voted against it, 3 people did not vote at all, and only 2 people voted yes. But one of those people was the chairwoman, and she claims that she heard more yeas than nays during the voice vote and decided to pass the legislation anyway. And it is so far passed into law. The group, however, Americans United for Church and State, disagree that this has gone forth lawfully and say that this is clearly unconstitutional. They said, quote, "Using congressional prayers does not, in fact, make this constitutional. A teacher-led prayer in a public school is undoubtedly different than a prayer in a legislative meeting. First, congressional prayers are directed only at the legislators themselves, who are all adults, rather than impressionable students." And they go on to say, "A legislative session typically has an atmosphere where adults are free to enter and leave, whereas students are a captive audience and are legally mandated to attend school." I see a lot of things coming from this, including bullying from teachers and students towards students who don't want to participate in this sort of thing. I see lawsuits from non-religious parents and other parents who are otherwise opposed to this measure. And but I also kind of just throwing it out there in case you want to answer it, but you don't have to. Is this really any different than making kids recite the Pledge of Allegiance? After all, there is the part about under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, but I've always taken issue with the Pledge of Allegiance, with or without the under God in it, because I have moral quandaries about making children who don't understand the words of a pledge make a pledge of blind patriotism before they're old enough to even understand what they're saying. So what do you guys think? What is your opinion?
Yeah, okay, so we got a couple questions here. I'll answer your last question first because that's the easier one for me. As long as kids are given a chance to opt out of the Pledge of Allegiance, then I don't really have a problem with it, even with under God in it. I actually have a problem with the Pledge of Allegiance because I'm a Christian. Like, I would never make my kids swear allegiance to a flag that made, because horrible things have been done in the name of that flag, and I don't want my kids to have to pledge allegiance to that. If their religious beliefs run against something that the country asked them to do, then I think that their duty is to what they think is right. But anyway, into the under God thing. I mean, like, that's such vague language, like that doesn't select a certain God. It doesn't, there's no favoritism of one religion in that, which I think is kind of the constitutional language there. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But again, as a person of faith, I would love to have God divorced from the actions of America, because I think America really gives God a bad name sometimes. But anyway, yes. But in terms of the congressional prayers, I don't know that they're so non-denominational. Like, I'm sure they're probably pretty explicitly Christian. And on top of that, like, those are grown men who can come and go freely as they please during that prayer session. They're grown men and women, I should say. Whereas these are kids who are a captive audience to a person of authority praying over them or whatever. Like, that's, to me, that's a completely different situation. And who I'm really mad at here is not the people who voted in favor of this. Like, I think their position is not right, and whatever. But like, who I'm really mad at this are the people who are against it and didn't call for the roll count vote. Like, if you truly believe this is wrong, and you know that you won the vote, why do you let it happen? Like that to me is much worse than holding the position that the other people are holding. Like I say, we disagree with them, but that's what America's about. You have these positions, and you come and you talk about them, you figure out who's right, and if you can't figure out who's right, then the majority wins. In this case, the majority didn't win, and that's horrible. But it's not the majority's fault. It's the minority, or excuse me, it's not the minority who's won fault. It's the majority's fault because they let the minority get away with it. If you know you've got the votes, why do you let this happen? I don't understand.
Because
right. I also take issue. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that's the purpose. The purpose of a voice vote is so you don't have to attach your name to it. So they don't want to be the guys who admit to voting no, or the guys who are fighting for the no position, but they are voting no. So the whole point is you're just trying to it was a voice vote. It didn't come out in your favor. Sorry, I'm in favor of prayer because I'm an Alabama politician, but that's not how the voice vote went.
But we know who voted though, so that argument doesn't hold up. Like we know to a man and woman who voted what way.
Right, and when there's only 8 people in the room, what chance have you got to really keep a voice vote secret anyway?
I know,
but I'm sure
the general purpose of a voice vote is to get rid of a paper trail, right? Like you don't want to have to write down and log your vote and all that. And they're not fighting probably because they don't really care. Like they're like nay, and then they decide.
They probably don't have any children in public school, so it doesn't really affect them most likely. I mean, even if they have children that age, they'd be in private school, so they don't care.
But to get to the crux of the issue, this law requires 15 minutes of prayer a day, and I just realized that's 3 5-minute prayer sessions for Muslims. So that's never gonna happen, and somebody should just bring it up that you're bringing Sharia law there because the Muslims should be allowed to pray too, right?
Right, absolutely. Of course, I'm sure that they would be up in arms if they actually tried to practice equality of different religions and during this little prayer session. But I'm sure they covered their asses by specifying that they have to be reciting the congressional prayers. So they can't use any Muslim prayers or Buddhist chants or anything like that. It's strictly, it's obviously Christian based. And if this wasn't Alabama, I would hope that it would be overturned. But because it's Alabama, I'm not really holding out much hope for that.
Well, maybe this isn't so bad, because it also means Muslims can pray, yada yada yada. But they didn't just pass hey, there's they didn't say the law doesn't say let's give kids a religious time during the course of the day to do their prayers or whatever. I wouldn't have a problem with that, truth be told, because my Muslim friends or whatever, if they're Orthodox Muslims, they have to stop and pray. And so that could be kind of disruptive, for a class if certain kids have to stop and pray while other kids are while the lecture goes on. So it might actually be beneficial to have a scheduled time that allows kids to practice their religion. And, while the Muslims are praying, the Christians can pray, and the kids who aren't religious can, they get a 5-minute break to go to the bathroom, whatever. But that's not what the law said. What the law said is we're going to read these specific prayers every day. And we know the content of those prayers, and it's not really something that's they are kind of vaguely non-denominational, but it's not like you're not allowing kids the individual liberty to practice their individual faiths. You are definitely promoting a top-down, religious practice from the leadership to the children. And so, to me, there's no way to defend that. That's unconstitutional.
Right. Absolutely. I agree.
What if the teacher is an 8?
Right.
Can't the teacher sue?
Yeah, that definitely. If I was a teacher, I would refuse to do it. Period. I'm not going to lead a prayer, and this is absolutely putting teachers in a position with which, if they're not religious, if they're atheist, or if they just don't want to do this, it's taking it out of their hands. They're required to devote up to 15 minutes a day at the beginning of each day, but they are required to recite this prayer every morning. It's definitely, I think, in violation of their personal religious freedoms and rights.
Yeah, oh, and let me be, Libby McLiverson here. The era, like, we're taking away kids' recesses and early dismissal days and music programs, and everything else because we've got to focus so much on getting every ounce of instruction, for the standardized test in the classroom every minute that we can. But then we're going to go ahead and take away 15 minutes a day of instruction time to pray this unconstitutional prayer.
What an absolutely excellent point. And it occurred to me too. Why are they wasting their time devoting, time to prayer when I don't even think, religion belongs in school unless you're teaching about all religions or something in a religion course. That would be cool. But otherwise, keep it out of the school and devote that time to actually learning something. Absolutely. They're cutting back on music programs, on art programs, on after school programs, and recess, which I definitely disagree with. I remember losing out on recess in the third grade and like pretty much hating school from that point forward because you don't get a break at all, but they're willing to throw in 15 minutes for this. It's ridiculous. Get your priorities in order. It's a school, send them out to recess for 15 minutes instead. I think that's a much better idea.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip, make sure to like and leave a comment below, or even share. Sharing is caring. If you want to see more TYT Nation videos, go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TYT Nation. Thank you for watching.